Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again. A big shout out to Furby House Books in Port Hope. It's our partnership with Furby House that allows us to bring authors to the screen. So we are very excited to continue that partnership. We are pleased to have author Bianca Marais with us here today. And Bianca is going to help us kick off Ontario Public Library Week. So this is very exciting. Yes, welcome, Bianca. Bianca is the author of the beloved Hum, If You Don't Know the Words, and If You Want to Make God Laugh, as well as the Audible original, The Prynne Viper. She was awarded the Excellence in Teaching Award for Creative Writing in 2021 from the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies. Her current release, The Witches of Moonshyne Manor, is described as a magical heist gone wrong. We also have back with us today Ashley Pimenter, who is our host extraordinaire. Welcome, Ashley. Yes, we're very grateful to have her ongoing support. Ashley creates and supports programming to support the kids who are part of the Girl Guides of Canada. She's also the co-chair of the Red Maple Awards Steering Committee and writes reviews for the Canadian Children's Book News. Welcome, Ashley, and welcome, Bianca.
Thank you so much, Beth. Oh, readers, we are in for a delight today. Okay, I'm going to show you this book before we jump in. This book, like if you are a book feel person, this book has like those lovely scallopy edges, and it has like just the most wonderful smell. And there's just like these beautiful little graphics throughout. It's an absolutely like beautiful hand feel of a book. If you are looking for anything, just like you just need a really good like cozy up and read, highly recommend this book. And we get to talk to Bianca today, who is the writer of this fabulous piece of fiction. Hi, Bianca. It's so nice to speak to you.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. You can see I'm talking to the right people when we talk about the smell of a book. Then these are my people.
Exactly. And I love that you've got like a cozy fire behind you. Like you've set the scene so perfectly for this book. Let's jump right in. Now, I've read the book and I'm going to try so hard not to spoil because I absolutely adored it. And so I'd love for you to tell our readers who haven't read it yet a little bit about the book and how this wonderful coven of women came to be.
Yes, well, thank you so much for those kind words. Yeah, so this book is about 6 octogenarian witches who are defending their manor and distillery from the townsmen who are coming for them. Because as we know, townsmen have been coming for witches for centuries, and they need to fight back, even though they have these diminishing powers because they, older and their powers have diminished somewhat. But they have the help of a 15-year-old TikToker called Persephone, who is eager to smash the patriarchy, along with the help of her sidekick, an Italian greyhound called Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this book is just a madcap romp of a book with a lot of heart and soul and quite a bit of social commentary.
Oh, that was so good. That like captured it so perfectly. I feel like you should just like share that all the time with it. One of the things and I'm going to jump right into one of the pieces that you've just pointed out is that you really take an intersectional lens as you are approaching this book. So in addition to being like this madcap romp, because that is the perfect way of describing it. And as Beth put it, a heist gone wrong.
Yeah.
You really like approach this idea of multi-generational feminism, intersectionality, and allyship throughout this. And I'm really curious about what your inspiration and process was for creating such disparate narratives that really come together so nicely.
Yeah, so actually all of my writing is fueled from a place of rage. And when you read this book, you wouldn't get that because it's a fun book. There's a lot of humor. There's, this madcap romp, as I've said. But honestly, I write from a place of rage. Anything in the world that makes me angry, that keeps me up at night, that makes my blood boil is what fuels my writing. And we've seen the last year or two, how women, again, their bodies are being regulated. We are being told how to be in the world, etc. And, there are people in the world like trans people who are getting a huge target on their back. And it breaks my heart that in this day and age, in 2022, these are the things that people care about in order to target somebody, what their gender is, and maybe what their sexuality is. And so all of those things informed this book, and you will find it throughout, because this book is a celebration of diversity. It's a celebration of sisterhood in all of its gorgeous, beautiful, messy glory. And, you know, these are things I wanted to shine a spotlight on while telling a really good story.
Oh, that's, yeah, that you're nailing it, my friend. Like, nicely done. Like, that is like, you're right. I would have never guessed it. But as soon as you said it, I was like, yes, I see it. Yes, it is such a nice outlet for it as well, because it's hopeful. It's so hopeful. And the interesting thing about this novel, especially, is on the ebook version, the log line is a witchy rom-com. And I was like, what on earth is a witchy rom-com? Because I was like, I have no idea what to expect going in, nothing like I expected. And one of the things I really thought was interesting is that you weave this idea of romance and comedy and relationships throughout it in such a beautiful way that, again, is underlined by this, like, the huge injustices that these women are facing in the story. And so I'm kind of wondering, from your perspective, why is comedy so crucial when you're trying to, as an outlet for rage and as an outlet for the stories that you're writing?
So, well, firstly, I was as surprised as anyone when my publisher pitched it as a rom-com, because we pitched it as contemporary fantasy. I feel like this book is as much a mystery as it is a romantic comedy. You know, there's elements of everything in there. But, you know, in terms of humor, we've come through such a bleak period of time. You know, the last few years have been difficult, with COVID, with Roe versus Wade, with the Capitol riots, everything that has been happening in the world, with the Ukraine. You know, we're all been in this really dark place. And I don't feel like we are able to tackle these things without the help of humor. Now, I'm originally from South Africa, and I say that the people of South Africa have probably got the best sense of humor in the world, because they deal with such hardship on a day-to-day basis. And it's become the most wonderful coping mechanism. And so, honestly, in South Africa, an hour after a tragedy, people will do these memes and jokes, and it's not to be disrespectful. It's purely as a coping mechanism. And so for me, in all of my books, they deal with heavy themes, important issues, but in a fun way, because I feel like this is how we interact with the world without letting the world bring us down too much. We're able to look at these things and laugh and feel them, but then ultimately feel hope and move on from that.
Oh, yep. This book, hope, is a major theme of this book. And it's interesting because I'm like, I don't know our audience overly well. And not all our audience is me. So I have to recognize that as well. And one of the things that you do, in addition to balancing the social justice messages in here and bringing in the comedy to, like, lighten it up, you also bring in this beautiful exploration of friendship and female relationship. And I'm going to read a passage from your book. It's in the beginning. It's pretty early, so people don't have to worry. I almost read it from chapter 62, and I was like, no. That's a big reveal. Actually, don't read that. Don't be foolish. And I love this scene. So Mirabelle is talking to Ivy. This is Ivy's remembering this part from the past. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Ivy after, and these characters in a little bit more detail in a moment. And Mirabelle says to Ivy, "Mark this, my child," Mirabelle said. "The strongest alliances you will ever have in your life will be with the women you choose as your family." "But you don't get to choose your family." Ivy was confused. "You're born into one." "You get two families," Mirabelle clarified, tucking a wayward strand of hair behind Ivy's ear. "The one you're bonded to by blood ties, and the one you're bonded to by force far greater than blood. Choice is a mighty powerful thing, Ivy. When the time comes, choose your sisters wisely." And it's just, now, as you reveal, Ivy's friends are sort of thrust upon her, and then they form as they come across.
Yeah.
So it's just this wonderful moment in this book where you have the matriarch talking to the future possible matriarch. Not going to tell you if that's actually going to come to pass. You have to read it and find out where Ivy's path goes. And it's just this beautiful exploration of found family and the power of friendship. And what do you hope your readers leave with that, with how you created this? And how did these 6 characters come to be in your mind as well. Like there's so much richness here. And I realize I'm asking like 4 questions.
No, they actually are related. I love that question because I have loved witch stories. And when I have read them, what the sort of golden thread through them is this mother-daughter lineage in which magic is passed down. And the mother is a witch and her daughter's a witch, and so it goes. But I was going, what about ones that do not come from traditional families? What about if witches are orphaned? Does that mean they don't get the magic passed down to them? And so this book was very much an exploration of that, because not every biological family is the perfect family. You know, families are meant to be this thing in your life that uplifts you and empowers you and protects you. But for many people, that is not their reality. And so these 6 little girls are all orphaned, very young. And the manor brings each of these girls to Ivy. I think I liken it to a cat who drops little mice at its master's feet. And the manor attracts each of these girls because the manor knows what Ivy needs. And often what we need is not necessarily what we want. And we find out later that we needed it. And so I wanted to explore that, this concept of found family, of female friendship, of us bonding together, and how each witch has got a different power and a different strength, which on its own is great. But when you see them as puzzle pieces that click together, each of them click into the greater whole. And once we have the whole of sisterhood, that is when they are the most powerful. And I was seeing this during COVID. What fascinated me during COVID, when we all locked down, was how women were still finding ways to commune with each other, to have sisterhood. And I was speaking to book clubs that were made up of women in their 70s and 80s who had never heard of Zoom, who didn't know how to use it, but they figured it out just so that they could have their weekly book club and their sewing circle and their quilting circle. And we weren't seeing men doing this. Men were still staying quite isolated, but it doesn't matter what happens in the world, women find a way to come together and uplift each other. And this was a celebration of that.
Yes, celebration is the perfect word. This really is such a celebration of female friendships and empowerment. And also, again, with this underline of humor, and I'm not going to talk about the heist because the heist comes in a little bit later.
Yes.
And
yes.
like I want the reader to have the same experience I did, where you're like, tell me more, tell me about this heist. What happened? And you unweave it so beautifully that I don't want to ruin anything on that one. So I just want to really reassure readers who are like, oh, but I'm really into a good mystery. You're going to get a good mystery with this too. There's so many pieces. That one of the interesting things that I loved about the layout of the book, and this is personally for me as a reader, is that you had this wonderful balance of telling flashback, telling present, and also interchange through all of it. Where's the grimoire as you were telling the little bits in these recipes? I have to admit, there's a few recipes. I'm like, I wonder if that really works. And it grounded you and brought you into the world. And so as a reader, I also felt like this additional character in the story where I was like, yes, tell me more, bring me into the circle. And I wanted to just celebrate that for a moment, as well as anyone reading this book feels brought in as well. And you did such a beautiful job of that. So like, kudos to you. Like, loved it. And you mentioned this with, there's a couple of passages throughout the book where you talk about age, and you mentioned earlier about like, sometimes like age, our powers begin to diminish as like humans in general, but also if you're a witch. And I really think it was interesting and a nice shift to read a book with older narrators. So people who were not my age, or like, and as like Beth had mentioned, I read a lot of YA with my work with the Red Maple. And it was so nice to see a different lived experience. Why was it important for you as a writer to explore someone who wasn't necessarily your contemporary?
You know, we come to fiction to see ourselves in that fiction. We come because we are empaths, and we want to live these experiences that we in our own lives will never get to live. And that is why we read. And, you know, we read things like the Babysitters Club, and we do a quiz and we find out which one of them we are. And perhaps we watch television like Sex and the City, and we find out which character we are there. And we watch The Golden Girls and we find out which character we are there. But it almost falls away after that, as if we stop existing beyond a certain point in our lives, as if we should become invisible. And that's one of the things that fills me with rage, because I am so sick of being told as a woman how I should be in the world. If I let my hair go gray, then I'm letting myself go. How dare I have wrinkles? I should be getting Botox. I should be doing this. I should be wearing these cosmetics. I should be looking younger. And the time and energy we spend on these things, we could be taking over the world if we just directed that time and energy into things that matter, as opposed to things that we are told should matter. And so again, after spending so many times with these book clubs, women who were in their 70s and 80s, who had the most fascinating stories. Do you know, I would be the author speaking at these events, and I would just want to shut up so that I could listen to the things they had to say, because some of their fascinating stories were amazing. Their lived experience was amazing. And again, that's something I wanted to celebrate. Forget this, you know, be depressed when you turn 40, be depressed when you turn 50, and so it goes. Every year is a gift. And again, that's something I really wanted to celebrate, was aging, because there is so much ageism in this world. It's considered one of the most socially acceptable prejudices that we have. They say 50% of people in the world exhibit ageist beliefs, and nobody confronts them about it. And so I really wanted to make people sit back and think about that.
Oh, yes, I agree. And it was like, the interesting thing is, you're right. Like, I wasn't, it may be a surprise to people, I loved the Babysitter's Club when I was a kid. I was in it to win it. And like, you're right, you saw yourself there, and like, it shaped my formative years. Like, I was a babysitter from these books. And I was like, I'm going to be Claudia this day. I'm going to be Christy this day. I'm going to be Stacy this day. I'm not cool enough to be Dawn, but I'm going to accept that. Like, and you had these characters, and you're right. And even the Golden Girls, like the Golden Girls, when it started, they were in their 50s. And that was like ground shaking. How dare you put someone in their 50s on TV? And they just like broke all these barriers. And so, and I love that your book is taking that same approach. And readers, if you want to know which witch you are, there's a quiz on your website. And I was delighted. As I was doing the quiz, I'm like, I really hope I get Ivy. Ivy seems like a good fit for me. And so when it popped up, Ivy's like, yes. And like, I had that moment all over again of like that childhood joy. There's something in your book where you just spark the joy of reading and the joy of the experience. And so like, kudos to you again, like kudos. This book is just, as you can tell, readers, I loved it. I've yet to read a book that I've had that I've had the opportunity to interview an author. I was like, this book was garbage. How am I going to talk about it? That has not happened. Like, this is entirely genuine. Furby keeps putting the most wonderful books in front of me, and yours is perfect for October as well, because like, it's fun to get into like the witchy season and the spookiness and the fall leaves and the darker nights.
Yeah, you know, the story takes place over Halloween. It's in the fall. It's got that lovely fall feel and the warm fires, etc. And I wanted to create this manor that people wanted to move into. You know, I wanted to create a place where I wanted to live, and that my readers would take joy in living there for however long they spent with the book.
Oh, that's fabulous. Is there a character that you most relate to, that if you were to do the quiz, you would get?
Yeah, I am pretty much almost 100% Queenie. I am the control freak, A-type Capricorn who, you know, runs everything. Maybe other people don't want me to, but I do. And that my worst fear is letting other people down. And that's exactly how I came into the character of Queenie, because fresh out the gate, you establish that Queenie has let things slide to the detriment of the sisterhood. And now they are vulnerable because of something she has done or not done. And that's the worst, you know, nightmare for somebody like Queenie. So definitely I relate to her the most. And then I'm probably 20% Persephone, I think.
Oh, Persephone. And actually, let's take a moment. We've talked about your older characters, but one thing I also wanted to highlight is that you do have Persephone, and Persephone is 15, I believe.
Yes.
And one thing that I really respected with how you approach Persephone is that you didn't trivialize her because she was a teenager. They didn't like, the adults had an adult response to a 15-year-old. It was very realistic. Like, let's be real. Like, they didn't like worship the ground she walked on. But you did such a nice job of also honoring the readers that came before and the readers who are yet to come, in the character of Persephone. Was it a bit of a challenge to tap into like the 15-year-old version of yourself to sort of like come into that voice?
I remember being 15 years old and being so idealistic. At that age, you feel like you can change the world. You're not yet jaded or kind of run down by things. And, you know, I remember being that age and just feeling like I could go out into the world and make such a difference. And that's what I wanted to capture with Persephone. You know, she is young. There is this intergenerational gap. The witches are in their 80s. They're not very politically correct. And yeah, you have this young girl who's calling them out on things. You know, there's one spell that's quite complicated later in the novel, and it requires things like a gallon of rhinoceros urine and, you know, spit from a very rare toad. And the witches just take this in their stride, and Persephone is horrified. And she's like, were these ethically sourced? Are these fair trade ingredients? Because that is what she cares about at this age. And, you know, they are baffled by her approach to things, but they're open enough to learn and to allow themselves to be taught by her, even as they themselves are teaching her. And again, that is something that women do so phenomenally well. Throughout my careers, throughout my life, I've tried to mentor younger women. And at the same time, I've allowed myself to be open enough to learn from them in return. And I feel like if we are able to do that across the generations, that's, again, when we're at our strongest.
Yeah. Well, this seems like the perfect note to end this on, of anybody and everybody should read this book, unless you are a not very nice man who would like to burn witches. Then we don't recommend this book. You probably won't see yourself here in a way you like. Not that I think any of our readers are that kind of person. We have to approach things with comedy. That's what we've learned in this session. Yes. Thank you so much, Bianca. This has been just a true delight. And thank you for bringing your rage and for giving us all a different way of exploring the world, especially just in time for Halloween.
Thank you, Ashley. And for those of you who experience similar rage, there is a rage room in the manor for Jezebel where she goes to throw and break things when she's filled with rage. So it's cathartic as well. And I hope you enjoyed that part of it too.
Wonderful, Bianca and Ashley. Thank you so much for a delightful conversation. And thank you to our audience for tuning in today. Audience, please go out and celebrate Ontario Public Library Week. Come to the library and borrow Bianca's book. We have it here in our collection where you can put it on hold if it has been borrowed. You can also purchase a copy of Witches of Moonshyne Manor at Furby House Books in Port Hope, should you wish to do so. All right, everyone, take care, and thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.